Welcome, everyone. I love getting to spend this time with all of you. Amanda, I love seeing your smile. It's so great. Welcome, welcome. And it's so much fun for us to have Josh Reeves here. Gusto has been one of our longest running partners. Casey and Ronnie and I used to drive up to San Francisco when they were in this like little closet of an office. And it's been amazing to see their growth and their trajectory. We have lots and lots of BreakLine alums at the company, including Marilyn Vaughn, who just accepted her customer success offer yesterday. So we're delighted about her success and joining such a great team. And so Josh, I love having you here. Thank you for joining us. And you actually chose that walk-on music. And I know you have a little story behind that. I'd love for you to share that with us.
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for the invitation and congrats to all of you for being a part of this incredible community. I'm thrilled to spend some time with you all and try to share some helpful advice. But to your question, Bethany, my family, we have a 2-year-old daughter, my wife and I, and we love, at least recently, have been dancing to that song with our 2-year-old daughter, River. So it brings a lot of fun memories to mind for me.
Josh, you actually talk a lot about your family. You're interviewed all the time. You've been on tons of different podcasts and news programs, and your family comes up often. Your mom is from Bolivia. Your dad's from a town outside of Pittsburgh. They were both parents. And I'd love for you to just talk about the influence, or they were both teachers. And I'd love for you to just talk about the influence that your parents have had on you, on your decision to start Gusto, and on your leadership style.
Happy to. I think family just has profound impact on all of our lives, and it's such an incredible responsibility and opportunity I see for my wife and I in raising our daughter. We have another child due in August, so we're getting close to growth of a different type happening in our family. But a little bit about my background. My parents, you mentioned, are not from the San Francisco Bay Area, so that was where I was raised. Not many folks are from out here. Both of them are from very far away. My dad's from a small steel town outside of Pittsburgh. His family for many generations had worked in the coal, steel, and brick factories there. And he was the first in his family to go to college, came out west, many decades ago with purple pants, long hair, and kind of was in a discovery phase, but decided to settle in San Francisco. My mom is from Bolivia, as you mentioned, Bethany. Her whole family is still there or in Argentina. And she came to the States when she was 18 to pursue her undergraduate degree, really created a journey for herself out of nothing. She came out speaking English, learned a new language, convinced the university to give her a scholarship, got a job, put herself through school. And so I really think of both of them as to me, great examples of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship to me is more of a mindset. It's really this idea of turning nothing into something and changing the world around you, and both of them did that in spades. Both became teachers. My dad was a high school teacher. My mom was an elementary school teacher, and I feel grateful today. They're about 8 minutes away from me, from where I live, and they're very much a part of my life.
In one of the podcasts I was listening to in preparation for this conversation, you mentioned that you and your brother grew up with your family in a 1,200 square foot condo in the Bay Area. What do your parents make of your success and what you've done? It's just been an amazing journey for you, and you've now built one of the most famous, most exciting companies in Silicon Valley. What do they think about it? What do they say to you about it?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. First off, for any of you that know me, I'll say whenever I hear anything in the vein of what you just shared, 2 things. Number one, this is a team effort, so I play one role in it, period, and it's 1,400 Gusties today that make what we did possible. And 2, I feel like we're still very early. I like to use the word progress. We've made good progress on our opportunity and the chance to go help small and medium businesses, but there's still a lot more for us to do, frankly. My parents, I think they feel, obviously very, very proud. They came here because they wanted to create opportunity for their children. They worked really hard and made tremendous sacrifices so that my brother and I would be able to go to college and be able to go pursue our goals and ambition. I think from a directly relating to it lens, I studied electrical engineering. My mom still thinks I'm an engineer. I still get asked to fix the TV and stuff at home. So they're pretty grounded. I wouldn't say there's much of reading about me in the news that is their focus. It's more about solving problems, and they know that I'm solving some problems on a bigger scale. But frankly, I have as much respect for the problems they're tackling and solving in their local communities as what I'm doing, on a much bigger platform.
I also think one thing that's really interesting about your family and your nuclear family, your wife is from Taiwan. You've grown up in this very multicultural household and extended family unit. And I can see echoes of that in the way that you lead Gusto and how inclusive Gusto is. And there's one obvious example, which is Gusto has a no shoes policy in the office. And so you walk into any office and there are like socks there for guests to wear, but everyone puts their shoes on a shelf before walking around the office. Can you talk a little bit about that? The fact that you had this very worldly context, and you've kind of been able to bring that lens to work with you as well.
Yeah, so maybe first just to address the unique tradition at Gusto, which makes me always smile. Um, First, traditions, and many of you are at companies or evaluating which companies to join, whether this is a tech business or not. I think traditions are a big part of a company's culture, and traditions form naturally. They should be authentic. They're not really like centrally planned activities. That tradition specifically started because we were working out of a home when we were building the company, three of us as founders. We hired some folks. We moved to that loft office. No one lived in it, but it was still kind of a home environment. And we were raised taking our shoes off at home by our parents when we were kids. So we took our shoes off because obviously we were still in kind of a home environment. And then we started growing, and Gusties said, "Hey, can we keep?" We call ourselves Gusties, but members of the team asked, "Can we keep doing this?" And so that's what drove that tradition. We'll see if it continues post, return to office, given COVID and this like big transition we've all gone through. But I think traditions should always be like authentic. It's not like they're the right or wrong traditions. They just form organically and either resonate or don't. So to the heart of your question though, about my background and kind of growing up with, I think more, at least some diversity in my life. I guess I'll say first off, I think it profoundly helped me in the context of relating to other people's experiences. And in my journey of building Gusto over the last 9-10 years, it's been very, very clear to me that I frankly had many gaps, many holes, and grew up in a very sheltered way. So I wouldn't say I was anywhere close to like as worldly or as widely able to relate to many perspectives as I can or should have been, frankly. And like in Raising River, we're eager to be much, much broader than just thinking purely about our own ethnic background. And so, in the context of company building, I think it's a topic that's relevant to life, not just company building. How do we, not just through our own experience, but through relating to other people's experiences, understand just the true incredible diversity of experiences and backgrounds that exist out there. And I'm still on that journey, frankly. But it has a profound impact on business in a good way, in my opinion. It helps us relate to our customers better, helps us build a better product, helps us build a better company. But we've just not been anywhere close to perfect on that dimension. And I want to make that clear. I'm still on a journey of improvement there as well.
Thank you, Josh. I want to pivot now, and I want to get into the story of Gusto and kind of start with a phrase that you have coined, which is minimum lovable product. So lots of us are familiar with minimum viable product. Get your ugly baby out there and allow your customers to help you improve your product or service through their feedback. Josh twisted this to minimum lovable product, and I'd love for you to talk about what that meant to you, especially in the early days of Gusto. And then would you bring us up to today and talk to us about the scale that you all have reached and what you're thinking about in today's terms for the company?
Yeah, I'll give credit to my co-founder Tomer, who coined it, but you're absolutely right. It's been a really core mantra in our approach to company building, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think any company exists to serve their customer. And in our case, we're helping customers with things like helping them get paid on time or accessing healthcare. And so the viable piece sometimes gets interpreted as it's okay if it breaks sometimes. And in our case, it's just not okay. Our product breaks sometimes. It's really important that it's always working. The lovable is just really, really important because a huge part of our opportunity is to take something complex and painful and make it simple and delightful. And the ingredients have always been there. People like to get paid. It's actually quite delightful to receive money in your bank account, it turns out. Surprise, surprise. It's just that people have made it tricky, complicated, difficult. Taxes are not fun. And they aren't. And that's why we try to take that off of your plate and make your life easier. So it's a big part of our development process. You want to also not stick yourself in a room and build for years and years. You want to get that feedback loop from the customer quickly. And so that's why minimum lovable becomes such a useful reference point. you can actually measure that. You track it. You have different ways to evaluate, is this resonating? And then for our business model, it's critical because a huge part of how we grow is through word of mouth, referrals. It's called organic in like the broader kind of go-to-market world. And so if we don't actually have that customer love, if we don't have that strong emotional reaction to, wow, this is amazing, you should use it, it actually affects our ability to grow in the future. So those are some of the reasons why it's worked really well for us. And I think probably for a lot of businesses, maybe if you want to spread that rebranding, minimum lovable versus minimum viable, I think is probably a better way to think about things.
And Josh, Gusto serves small businesses, and this was another point that you made that I wasn't aware of. So you were focusing on businesses with 1 to 100 employees, and those companies employ a third of the American workforce. It's like an enormous segment of the market. And will you talk to us about where you all are today, about the scale that you've reached together as a team?
Yeah, so we love serving small business. It's a segment that's been underserved for a long time. It's a big segment, as you just mentioned. We help over 100,000 companies today, and we'll be announcing some new metrics in a few weeks, but we announced 100,000 a few years ago, so assume it's quite a bit higher at this point. And we are domestically focused to date. We'll have the ability to expand internationally in the future. And from a company size lens, really the oldest program and activity at Gusto has been helping new employers. So folks, when they start out, hiring their first employee and making that process as simple as possible and making it something that anyone can do without any training or background in building a business. But we will expand segments over time. We do talk now more about the kind of 1 to 500 employee segment. That's about half of the workforce in America. But far and away, the majority of our customers will always be very, very small. There's 6 million employers in America, 3.5 million are sub 5 employees, over half. And so again, just a segment that does really meaningful work. These are businesses that are more than not labors of love. And it's just an incredible time to go help those businesses. You really needed things like cloud, paperless, mobile, APIs, and really great modern development practices to actually build products that were usable to this segment. And not just us, folks like Square, folks like Shopify, et cetera, have really focused on small business to a really positive impact, in my opinion.
So I have a little story here. When we founded BreakLine about 5.5 years ago, we originally used paychecks for payroll. And it was me and Ronnie, and I used to just cry and pull my hair out because it was so impossible to use. And finally, Paychex made this enormous mistake. And so out of desperation, I was looking around for a different solution and found Gusto. And our business now is 20 people, and we are in 20 different states across the US. Payroll and the tax system is not set up to support small businesses. It's incredibly painful. And Josh, one of the things that you say Gusto is good at is creating simplicity out of this insane, incredibly complex system. Why was that so important for you guys to be really, really good at simplicity?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, and I'll just kind of take us back 10 years when we started the company, we really wanted to tackle a problem that was really clearly a problem. And like, it wasn't just your story anecdote. Like, we had our own stories, anecdotes from prior small businesses we had started and run. I had actually also used Paychex previously, and at that point found it quite frustrating. But also, you look at the data, add up Intuit, Paychex, and ADP, and their entire market share combined is less than 50%. You have a huge number of these businesses doing things like payroll by hand, manually. And you have lots of fines and penalties and mistakes being made. And so we really just met and talked to lots of small businesses. My two co-founders, Tomer and Eddie, have small businesses in their family. My mother-in-law runs payroll. So we had connection points that way as well. And it was, I think, just kind of more of an obvious goal. Like, if these business owners are wearing 20 different hats, really, what should they be spending time on? What do they have to spend time on? And what can we help them spend either more or less time on? And things like taxes and really anything related to government is important, right? If you don't file correctly, a lot of these programs have lots of good impact. But a business owner doesn't stand out or get more customer or hire better teammates by filling out the form in a blue pen or a black pen on a 5th time 1 day faster. Like, right? It just needs to get done. And so it's just a classic software problem, in our opinion. Like, you have all these complex rules and requirements. You have over 10,000 different payroll tax requirements across the country, local, state, federal. Again, and this is how government gets funded, frankly. So there's a lot of importance to these actions being done correctly. But it's not what, again, a business owner should be spending lots of time on. They should be spending time on serving their customer, on hiring great teammates, on building good cultures, on building great businesses. And so to me and us, that was part of why we got started in the first place, was saying, hey, we call it peace of mind. Let's go take 5 of those 20 hats off of this business owner's head and be their partner. And our business model is a subscription-based business model. You know, we add value to your life, we solve problems for you, you pay us monthly. And if we do it for 20 years, you'll pay us for 20 years. And if we do more for you and you hire, you know, we price per employee, and we have additional things like healthcare. We can help you set up health benefits very smoothly now through Gusto. Then you pay us more. And so I love the alignment of incentives there. In a lot of tech businesses, you can have perverse alignment of incentives, especially for ad-based business models. For our business model, it's as simple as if we help them succeed, we succeed. And I think that's something that also makes our life quite a bit easier in the context of company building.
I love it. And a BreakLiner, Isabel, had pointed out that Gusto's UX is so lovable. And I agree. Like, you get this great email that's like a celebration of getting paid. And it's just a really fun moment. And it does feel like a partnership. So you have hired lots of people. And as you said, you always give credit to your team. You have 1,400 teammates around you helping you drive and make progress toward this vision. And you are really interesting. You have a really interesting perspective on interviewing and hiring and how you evaluate people. And you've talked about looking at values, motivation, and skills alignment, where a lot of hiring managers will just look at skills. And can you talk to us about why that sort of expanded aperture is important to you?
Yeah, I mean, our focus on people, to me, is really not a choice. It just seems very logical. Maybe to others, it seems like a surprising choice. But like, our ability to accomplish anything we want to go do is tied to the people that choose to join Gusto and spend time contributing to that goal. So my job is ultimately all about people. And when we were thinking about building the team, starting, you know, hiring our first Gusty, you know, I guess the alignment thing jumped out because it's always a choice on both sides, right? I don't believe companies convince people to join them and candidates convince companies to hire them. Both parties are trying to figure out, can we accomplish something together? And then both ultimately make a choice on, do we want to go do that? And so for us, the 3 pieces you just alluded to, you know, jumped out early. The third is what I think everyone kind of really quickly understands: skill. Like, obviously, if you're hiring for an engineering role, maybe, and it's, you know, whatever way you want to classify that, has this person, can they do engineering work, right? You're not going to always hire and then train someone for a long time. You have to see if they can, you know, solve that need in the short term, and then grow and build more skill over time. But the first 2 are actually where I spend most of my time in interviews. It's the values alignment and the motivation alignment. And I found that those 2 dimensions can just be and have been profoundly impactful in our journey of building Gusto in the way that we operate. And we talk a lot about that as the how, right? The what is like things like strategy, market, you know, business model, et cetera. The how is actually the way we collaborate, the way we work, and the what and the how both matter equally. And so, you know, I used to interview every Gusty up till about 60 people, and my interview was very focused on, again, values and motivations. We ended up obviously, you know, evolving that to a more scalable program, and we have an interview at Gusto called VMA, Values and Motivation Alignment. We do a training with Gusties who volunteer to be a part of that interview cohort, and every candidate goes through an interview that focuses on those 2 dimensions. And one thing I'll make clear on the values side, you know, I think for whatever company someone's either thinking of joining or starting, to me, there aren't like template values. Values need to be opinionated, they need to be authentic, and they need to be consistent. And if you're not aligned with the company's values, if we find a candidate who doesn't map to our values, they're not a bad person at all. It just means they'll be more successful in a different environment. And so for us, values alignment is about understanding really how and what drives someone, the way they work and the way they collaborate. And there's just a way we do that at Gusto that we want to maintain. And then motivation, I think, again, hopefully maps to lots of companies. We just find when someone authentically cares about what we're trying to do, they care about things like helping a small business succeed. They care about enabling healthcare to be more accessible. They care about, you know, with Gusto Wallet, helping financial planning to be more accessible to those who today are oftentimes in debt, getting taken advantage of. If those problems matter to them, they'll approach work differently. And those problems don't have to resonate with everyone. That's okay. There's a lot of other problems out there. But if we find that they do resonate, again, that's something we screen for. It can actually meaningfully affect the way they show up day to day. So, again, values alignment, motivation alignment, skill alignment, something I think that maps hopefully to how many companies approach team building, has been really important to us since the first hire we made back in 2012.
Thank you, Josh. And my teammate Zane Knob had posted in the chat that Enoch Shee, who's been an amazing champion for BreakLine within Gusto, asked what brings this person joy at work, which is such a great and insightful probing question. So you as CEO of Gusto and your team, I think together you all have raised about $500 million to support and help build the business. And so the presence of your investors is also a pretty significant element in the company's trajectory and ability to reach these goals. And you have actually said that your lens on fundraising is that it's really similar to hiring. And you're looking for folks who share your value system and can be articulate about why they care about your problem and how they can help. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your sort of strategy with partnering with different types of investors at different points along the way for Gusto?
Yeah. So I do think of fundraising as hiring. Average length of time I've known one of our institutional investors, because we did raise from some angel investors early on, and I'm really grateful for their involvement. I would have frankly given them money to give us advice. Instead, they gave us money and advice, so it was a win-win.
Josh, sorry, and weren't the angels 20 different tech CEOs?
Yeah, if it helps, our early seed round funding was from 20 founders, CEOs, folks that have been company builders, and they were invaluable sounding boards to me to understand what worked, didn't work, pitfalls, and then ultimately me and the team deciding what works for Gusto. But really grateful again for their involvement. But on the institutional side, it's probably about 2-3 years on average. I get to know someone before we decide to work together and have them potentially invest. And that's because I do think of it as hiring. You're having someone join your team. They're going to be, working in a different format. They're not full-time. They're not in the office with you. Well, no one's in the office right now. We're all in different places, but they're still on the team, and they still have aligned incentives. They still want you to succeed. They're still going to be speaking on your behalf. And so, values alignment, motivation alignment, skill alignment, still relevant. And then, on the broader topic of fundraising, I really think there's some pitfalls there too. I think our goal has never been to raise money for the sake of it. We should always be building a sound business that manifests in things like our unit economics, our gross margin, our CAC, just having a solid business model, period. But there is a dynamic where we've raised money for sure to go really pull forward time and try to make some R&D investments that can get us to places earlier. So even the investment we made in 2015 to go launch health benefits, over time we could have gotten there ultimately through cash flow, but it's really prudent for us to raise VC money to go accelerate that, hire a bunch of engineers and all the corresponding stakeholders involved, build some of those features and product functionality, get that to market. And now it's not just a pain point we're solving, but also a meaningful part of our business model. So I think fundraising can always be a useful way to collapse time. You just have to be really intentional about why you're doing it, what are you hoping to accomplish from it, and how do you measure success from it. And I think some companies that use fundraising as a means to make up for a bad business model is where I think it gets a little bit more into kind of gambling and buying lottery ticket space versus, company building.
Thank you, Josh. We are sort of 15 or so months into COVID, and you all were really thoughtful during the pandemic, both about how to support your team internally and then also how to support the small businesses that you serve. And the BreakLine team was a beneficiary of that. We used a bunch of the tools that Gusto makes available to sort of evaluate PPP loans and stuff like that. And could you talk to us about some of the lessons learned from sort of managing and leading through the pandemic, and maybe some of the insights that you and your team took away?
Yeah, so I'm incredibly proud of Gusties over what they've been able to accomplish in the last 15 months. When COVID started, we and everyone didn't know what the future held. It was a time of a lot of uncertainty, but one thing that was very, very clear was that this was our time to shine, our time to be there for our customer, our time to help them, period. And our purpose, things that we do, were never more relevant. Like, again, payroll, health benefits in the middle of a financial crisis and health pandemic are quite at the core of basically helping people navigate, what we were all kind of collectively going through. So I think having that motivation alignment, Gusty's really rose to the occasion. We had a lot of work to do to help small businesses. We did things like waive our fees if someone needed to defer paying us. They could pause account and stop paying us. Really wanted to meet folks where they were, which at that point in time was just pure crisis mode. And I was really gratified to see, multiple months later, the number of companies that were able to survive, come back, pay us in full. Really demonstrated more than anything the durability of small business, and also, numerically validated the durability of our business model. But some lessons on navigating it. I'm still in learning mode. Like, the truth of it is, it's been one of the most amazing 15 months in the company's history. We grew, our fiscal year is May through April. We grew 50% last May through April. So at the heart of COVID, we literally added 50% more customers to our company. You can imagine the amount of both excitement and work that created for us. And we've been public on that number too, in case anyone was wondering. And at the same time, I know when I look and talk to Gusties today, I see that pride in their faces, and I see exhaustion just as much. So, yes, we've been doing our best to navigate. It's just been a really intense time as well. And a lot of my time right now is spent more on how do we navigate exhaustion and turn that into a more sustainable, stable way for us to work than just feel good because obviously we achieved a lot of impact.
What are some of your early thoughts around that? Because I think that feeling of exhaustion. So the BreakLine team, our company, is shutting down for the next week, partly for this reason, just to give folks a chance to breathe. And I think it's sort of a universal experience coming out of the pandemic. What are you all finding in terms of how to support your team and ensure that people have the rest that they need to achieve the goals that you all have?
Yeah, so I think many dimensions. Some are a little bit Gusto specific. Like, on one part of it, it's clear we have hiring to do. So that's maybe an understatement, but we'll be adding probably about 700 people to the team this year. Given how much uncertainty existed last year, the truth is we wanted to prevent the pitfall of overhiring, and no one really could predict the future. The outcome was we frankly are understaffed relative to the amount of business volume, customers, signups, and need that we see. And so part of it is hiring. Part of it is also organizational. We went through pretty much the biggest org restructuring in 5 years in the last few months to really try to simplify where people focus. And we talk about these customer segments now inside the company. The ones I can share more publicly, actually, the last fourth one just got announced today. Or yesterday, but we talk about employers, we talk about accountants, we talk about members, those are the people getting paid, and the people getting healthcare, and we talk about developers, other software partners, and that's something we launched yesterday called Gusto Embedded Payroll. It's an infrastructure offering for other software companies. But we went through a pretty big org redesign to basically try to create these kind of swim lanes for folks to have more focus. So they weren't pulled in as many directions. And then I think, Bethany, you're getting to at the more individual level, yes, there's also things like how do we navigate people being out of the office? Now we're going through a transition phase to some people being back in the office. How do we think about work expectations? How do we think about PTO time, et cetera? And I can't say that there's a one size fits all. I've had colleagues thrive and work from home. I've had colleagues find it incredibly challenging. And so our approach to resolution is not a one size fits all. It really is very much at the team and at the individual level. But I think the main most important thing is companies spending time on this topic versus assuming anything is sustainable, and how we worked over the last 15 months. And it just takes time to navigate and deconstruct and find what's the best path for this next chapter.
Thank you, Josh. I'm going to ask one or two more questions, and then we'll turn it over to questions from our attendees here. Even pre-COVID, Gusto was progressive about expanding into other parts of the country to sort of bring opportunity to different communities across the country. When lots and lots of tech companies were very Bay Area centric, you all established a second, you all call it Homebase. So you started the company in the Bay Area, and then you established a second home base in Denver. We have a bunch of BreakLiners in the Denver office: Jasmine Motupali, David Shepard, Eddie Ortiz, Luis Reyes is moving out there shortly. And so it really did make it more affordable for folks and more accessible for really outstanding people to join the company. And you've expanded further. So you now talk about having 4 home bases in the company. Can you talk a little bit more about what those home bases are and the strategy behind establishing those?
Yeah, so we did start the company in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's where Tomer, Eddie, and I lived when we began Gusto. And it was in, I want to say 2014, we started thinking about it. And then 2015 when we opened the Denver office. And the core principle then matters just as much now. I just experienced in prior non-Gusto chapters, like the dynamic of when you have a headquarters and it lands as, hey, that's where like all of the really important decisions get made, or that's where you have to go to like really get opportunity and career growth. And then, I just always either experienced or imagined like, what does it feel then to not be in a headquarters? Am I just not as important? Am I just like, on a different tier? Like, how disempowering and demoralizing can that be? And like, and then I'm supposed to go do work and contribute. So there's just something that never computed in my head for why we'd want to ever create that expectation. And so that's what drove the Homebase philosophy, which continues to evolve. But at the core of it, it's a belief that we want, at whatever home base someone's at, the ability for them to have role models, have leaders they can look up to, have the ability to grow and develop and gain new skill, and not feel like, hey, there's one office where you really get the big opportunities and the other ones are kind of just playing second fiddle. So that's the objective, that's the guiding principle. We've opened a New York home base a couple of years ago now, right before COVID. And then the 4th home base, we actually think of now as remote. And we like that language because it makes it clear, again, one's not more or less important. We have 4 home bases, 3 are physical location, 1 is remote. And for each of them, how do we make each successful? And how do we map leaders to each of them? How do we check in on the different teams and roles that exist in each of them? They're not completely apples to apples. We're not trying to clone SF in Denver. We're not trying to have all the same roles and all the same home bases. That doesn't make any sense. But it's again, more on the opportunity side. We want people to feel like in whatever home base you're in, you have the chance to grow, develop, and have an impact. And also have leaders, again, that you can look up to and admire. And then there's a lot of other manifestations of it in terms of like travel, where I used to spend time before COVID. I was in Denver every month doing all hands. Those things will all evolve now with remote and then more home bases to come. But I hope the intentionality of, hey, regardless of what home base you're in, you feel like you can be a Gustie, grow, develop, and also make that location your own, persist no matter how many home bases we have.
Josh, a BreakLiner at Gusto, Neckpen Wilson, is here, and she just put in the chat that being at Gusto has been the best role of her career, and she's one of your remote employees. So she and her husband Eric relocated to Texas, and so it's great to see that people who are in that remote home base are really thriving at the company. Last question from me for now is Gusto just completed its first acquisition, company called Adrius. And I'd love for you to talk to us about why you all acquired that company and how it fits in with your long-term strategy.
Definitely. And first, I'll just give a shout out. I know Gusties are on the call, so hello, Gusties. And hello, non-Gusties too. So yeah, we bought a company called Ardius, and it, I guess the philosophy here again is more in the world of turning what we view as the future into reality. So if I take a step back, I really think at the core, the difference between a tech business and a non-tech business is in tech, you get a lot of leverage through using technology. And in a non-tech business, you don't have as much leverage, but that's fine too. A lot of small businesses want to stay small, right? Not every business needs to grow bigger. But if the leverage is the biggest difference, the rest of it to me is pretty much the same. It's you exist to fix something. You exist to make something in the world around you better or different. And hopefully it's broken now and you want to make it non-broken. I would not associate with any companies that aspire to do the opposite. And so we have a pretty clear point of view on really what the future looks like. And that's our due north. And what we debate in planning and strategy is more the sequencing. How do we get there? And are we getting good feedback loops from our customer on what that future is, and it's what they want to, right? We have a picture point of view on like what payroll and how that works, how healthcare is done, how financial savings are done, and we're progressing on all those dimensions. And historically, it's mostly been through building. So you hear things like build, partner, buy. We've mostly been doing a lot of building, and we're going to continue to do a lot of building. That's us hiring folks to the team. We go build various products, functionality. That includes not just software teams, but operations teams, CX teams as well. We've done a lot of partnership. That's us working with other companies where we don't want to build it ourselves, don't need to. Maybe they've done a good job, and now it's us collaborating. And we just haven't done much buying. And for us, it's just a muscle we want to build. It's, to me, logical. It can be really helpful. It can accelerate our route to serving and solving a pain point for the customer. But we have to approach it with just as much intentionality. It's still hiring. So in this case, we brought 20 folks on board, kind of all in one fell swoop. They're focused on R&D tax credits. It's an amazing set of features and functionality. These are basically government programs that can give the equivalent of free money to a company if they map to certain criteria. Historically, big companies have the money to hire, accounting firms to go do this analysis. Small businesses are left out of being able to participate. And like a lot of the data ties to payroll, so we're going to make it really super simple and easy to go turn that tax credit into real concrete value to you as an employer. Plays to our strength, in terms of, again, making government stuff simple, easy, straightforward, and more accessible. And the team is amazing. Thrilled to have them join. They joined us a couple weeks ago.
That's amazing. And it's also, when you bring in an entirely new team, I'm sure that culture is top of mind because you all have also created such a compelling culture together at Gusto. And Amanda has a question about this. She said, how have you learned to grow and maintain Gusto's culture? And what are you looking for when you bring new people in? You've already talked about values and motivation alignment. Is there anything else that's sort of in the back of your mind when you're assessing whether this would be a great match between a potential candidate and the company?
The quick answer is no. I mean, values alignment, and we haven't spent too much time on Gusto's values because I want to make these learnings at least hopefully accessible to folks joining lots of companies. But our values are very specific. It's things like humility coupled with a lot of ambition. Dream big and then make that dream and vision real. It impacts the way we collaborate, the way we work, service mindset, for example, celebrating the success of our customer. And so that's what guides us on alignment more than anything. We've talked about motivation and then skill. And then on every other dimension, we want as much diversity of perspective, background, experience as possible, because that's what our customers are for one reason, or as one reason. And that's why I avoid the word, by the way, culture. I feel like culture has too many definitions. I literally just ground it in like values, traditions. You've heard actually a couple or one of our traditions. You've heard a bit about our values. Like that is what I think of as kind of parts of how we work. And yeah, culture or words like family to me, I think have a lot more. They're powerful words. They have so much meaning, but they also, I think, can be abused or misapplied so often. So I try to go like one click deeper. For us, it's values and traditions that are what you'll see if you're at Gusto. And what manifests most in hiring is purely the values piece of it.
Mm-hmm. One of the early BreakLiners who joined Gusto, Jasmine Motupali, my colleague Zane was saying, she always talks about how she really felt the authenticity with Gusto, that it was about culture add rather than culture fit, and feeling like somebody had to be within a particular box to be a great addition to the company.
Actually, yeah, one thing there, Bethany.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, the core of your question was how do we scale it and keep it? So I didn't address that. Jasmine's comment is right on point. Like, it is not about me interviewing every person at Gusto anymore to maintain it. Like, if we hire people that have that values alignment and then they join and get excited because they see people around them that share those values, I found at least up to the 1,400 people we're at today, they then want to and fight for and take action to maintain that as they are involved in hiring the next 100 or 500 or 1,000 people. And so it can propagate. It definitely can continue. I don't need to go audit or review every scorecard. I have the utmost trust because I talk to people in onboarding and I know that they're joining for that alignment. And then when they're on a hiring panel, they're going to, make sure that it manifests just as much.
Hey, Josh, that value of humility, it's so clear that that's authentic to you. You talked about like fixing your parents', TV and stuff. And other lines that I've heard you say along these lines are something like heroes don't scale, and just the idea that that like the big brash sort of personality is the only way to win in Silicon Valley. Why is humility so important to you?
Well, I think for us, it starts with like serving the customer, I guess, first and foremost. One thing I'll note though, we have lots of different personalities at Gusto. That's not one of our filters, right? So like, you can all get a sense of like my personality, what drives me. Part of what excites me in our journey is trying to really make clear, because there's, I think, some overly simplistic generalizations and takeaways on Silicon Valley today that I disagree with pretty strongly. People can be, humble and incredibly ambitious. You can be really competitive and you can be kind. These are not mutually oppositional concepts. And so and I think everyone joining Gusto kind of lives and breathes that mentality. But we have, really strong extroverts in the company. There's members of our leadership team that are very outspoken and love to, again, really span the gamut of like, approaches to how we engage and converse, as long as the values alignment is there. And the humility just brings us together on like purpose. Like you will not find people at Gusto who do things for their benefit at the cost of the company, or view the world as a zero-sum game where they win when someone loses. Even how we talk about competition, like, we compete with paychecks. They've come up a few times. I don't actually find any joy in, talking bad ill or wishing anything bad upon paychecks. There are probably people there working hard to go build a business that can add value. I hope. I don't know many people there, but I definitely don't wish ill will on them. What we focus on is what's in our control, which is the product we build, the customers we serve, the strategy we've set, and the execution we have to go live up to and do. So I hope I'm answering part of your question there. I think heroism doesn't scale. That's a bit of like a, having grown up here, a thing I noticed where like the, hey, you stayed up all night thing can be celebrated. And maybe in the short term that works, but I guess the full comment is heroes don't scale, or heroism doesn't scale, heroes become martyrs. Like if we're here to build a multi-decade business, like how do we do that thing again 5 times more? And if someone's so exhausted, or in this case, sleep deprived, that they can't help anymore, that actually isn't gonna help us. So how do we build like repeatable systems and structures and processes? How do we take learnings and expand them? How do we, continuously try to go think about, great, we solved that puzzle. Like, how do we solve the next puzzle? Or how do we solve this puzzle 5 times faster? And that to me is really where we spend most of our time in scaling, frankly.
Thank you, Josh. Maya has a question. She says she watched an interview that you did a couple of years ago, and you mentioned 3 phases of building Gusto. The first was building the core payroll system. The second was building health benefits. And she said you articulated a 3rd phase about focusing on personal prosperity for employees. And she said she thinks that's so awesome. She's wondering, with Gusto Wallet and Cash Out, you seem to be in phase 3. How do you see this phase evolving?
Yeah, and actually we've had a few more phases, and to be, I guess, to share a little bit of how we think about it, like these are not like sequential phases, it's more like layers. So we're still investing a ton in things like payroll, and there's lots of opportunity to make that better. We're investing a ton in health benefits, but it's really, when do we feel like the organization has the ability and we have the people and the skill to go add in some of these additional kind of layers, and then we can start those as small efforts and they grow. And frankly, we have decades more, roadmap and layers to add given the opportunity ahead. But specifically to Gusto Wallet, for folks that aren't as aware, it's really a suite of financial products for the individual getting paid through Gusto. They're free. And really, it's meant to solve some really acute pain points that we feel like we can uniquely solve that help the individual be in a better financial position. And the benefit to them is literally being in a better financial position. I'll talk about that in a sec. But the benefit to the employer is then having a member of their team who has a more stable, financial life, can be more present, more available to kind of contribute to the company, et cetera. But some of the things in that that suite include a feature called cash out. So if someone has an emergency and they're on a 2-week pay schedule, you want to access, a few $100s of your money you've already earned. Let's say you're 5 days into that pay period. You can do that for free through Gusto, and that avoids someone having to go use payday loans or overdraft fees or credit card debt, which we think, again, can be very predatory. That moment should not be monetized. Someone's having an emergency, they've already made money, they just haven't received it yet. That should be a free feature set. We think every payroll company should do that in the future. But it also includes savings. If you actually have money set aside and can start saving directly from your paycheck, set aside $5, $10, you name it, then when you have an emergency, you don't even need cash out. You actually can just use the savings you've set aside. So you can get a debit card through Gusto, you can have a bank account. Our goal there is to really build the best banking platform, period, for these consumers directly attached to your paycheck. So a really big, bold, ambitious part of our business. It's about 50 people. It's us taking on all of the banks out there, basically. We work with banks on the back end, but from a customer experience standpoint, we really want to be their mobile app. We want to be their core banking experience. So lots of work ahead there as well.
Mm-hmm. Josh, when you were describing that the chat is going off because several BreakLine communities are affected by payday loans. You see that a lot with our military community and others. So people are responding and saying that this is so cool. Did you have something else?
Fascinating. If you want to go on a soapbox for a sec, it's just crazy to me, right? You work 2 weeks, or you're on a 2-week pay period. You work a week, and it's just it's a reminder again of, you can look at things that have been a certain way and be like, that's the way it is, and you just apply a different perspective. Like, why should when someone gets terminated, that's a sad topic, but happens in companies. They get paid that day legally in many states. So basically, people get paid earlier if they're fired versus if they're the person still working. There's just a lot of things that, this will be one of them, I hope, where you look back, hopefully not in many decades, but a few years, and go, why did that entire industry ever exist? Like, it should not have existed in the first place. It's an idiosyncrasy of these 2-week pay schedules. And I'm glad, and I hope it entirely kind of goes away, frankly, as we expand what we're doing here, and others hopefully mimic and copy us. I hope every payroll company, again, offers that feature.
Mm-hmm. Zane has a question, Zane Stickle, and he says, and I love this question because you speak about this topic. He says, how do you assess authenticity or earnestness in the values and motivation component of your hiring process? And you've talked about the importance of the question, why?
Yeah, and my advice for folks in general is learning how to interview, and many of you maybe have done that before, maybe some of you are newer to it. I found is actually not something that can be learned in a book. It's through experience, because like learning what drives someone, learning what their motivations are, understanding their values alignment. I don't have a formula. There's definitely no, like you said, these right words at all. It's really just understanding them better. And the best means I have of enabling a conversation that gets to that is asking why. And it's not the first why, right? If someone's coming in, especially if they have the mindset of, I'm supposed to package and polish myself for an interview versus just be myself and share my thoughts, the first answer might be more of that packaged polish answer, and then I ask why, and then the second answer might be a little bit like kind of just more like riffing and sharing, and then the third answer is usually the one where I'm getting into like just a conversation about like someone's journey, about a specific work chapter. Maybe they launched a product feature, like why was it done, and what excited you about that, and like who was involved, and like how did you split up responsibilities, and like what moments did you celebrate, and like which parts were really frustrating. Just I guess applying why and curiosity can get people to ultimately just sharing. And then the outcome of the interview for us is, yes, we look at then in their sharing, did like humility come up or get demonstrated, did service mindset get demonstrated. But we don't ask people like, are you humble or do you have service mindset? Those are more just backdrops to the things that we're thinking about. And I hope we get to a place where people are not faking either way, because if they happen to figure out a way to trick us in the interview and then join, they're just not going to be as successful or happy at Gusto, because that's just how we operate. And again, we're trying to just find that authentic alignment versus like any type of packaged or polished kind of representation of it.
All right, Josh, we have a question from the newest BreakLiner to join Gusto, Marilyn Vaughn, who just accepted her offer to join the customer success team. And she says, how does Gusto evaluate new opportunities for its products or new frontiers to explore? How do you decide what to build next?
Yeah, great question, Marilyn, and welcome to the team. So it's a continual process. Where it manifests most is, and we've had to create, and I think it's good to create some structure around it. At the biggest, kind of broadest like level where I spend time, we do annual planning, but even more than that, we do these 3-year plans. So we actually just went through that process and put a bunch of stakes in the ground over what the next 3 to 4 years look like. And then the biggest is like vision, right? Like, where do we think, like, how should healthcare be done? We have strong opinions about that. But how do you break down that objective into the sequences and the stages and the speed at which we can get there, where some things will be right on, some things will be wrong on? That's where we get into the 3-year strat planning, to 1 year, to then mid-year. And it's a feedback loop. So we have to put stakes in the ground. When you have as much opportunity as we do, and opportunity means pain points we know we can help with, focus is actually the most important thing. Our biggest pitfall would be trying to do too much at once. And so we use all those processes I just mentioned more than anything to kind of gut check and say, well, really, what are we going to do and not do? And then how do we know if that's the right thing, and what metric are we going to look at, and how do we measure, are we on track or not? So that's like a really high level frameworky structure answer. But I do think companies need to figure out where they're at in that spectrum. Are they doing too much? Are they doing too little? And we've had a history over 9 years of at times doing too much, or in my opinion, also going too slow and doing too little. And I think that's the like healthy discussion to have in like quarterly board meetings, et cetera, on this topic around prioritization.
Mm-hmm. Okay, question from Crystal, which is a related question. She says, what is Gusto's approach to soliciting, analyzing, and incorporating feedback from small business owners to help Gusto solve their pain points? How are you hearing from your customers about what they need?
Yeah, the quick answer is in whatever way possible. So, that can be directly from when someone's talking to us and on a phone call or an email, and we have ways to summarize and synthesize the many interactions we have. We have a report we call Voice of the Customer. We call our employers customers. But then there's also at the individual level, it could be someone shadowing a call and just listening in. It could also be in a UXR type research where we're actually having a customer sit down and go through a specific flow and really understanding and almost interviewing them to understand like what's good and bad about the experience. Sometimes it's in research mode where actually it's something we're thinking of building and we want to just understand, would this make a difference in their life? And it could be mock-ups or just like visuals of what might be coming. We do surveys and enable folks to kind of answer quick responses. Sometimes that's customers, or sometimes that's leads, or that's folks that have never heard about us. So I think in general, like if you're attached to more the product development side of a business, these are all great inputs. There's no limit to how many inputs I think are worth having. I think equally so, whatever the inputs are, you have to have judgment on which pieces to then act upon, right? So if you ask a customer what they want and you build whatever they ask, you build better, faster, cheaper versions of the present. And the classic, metaphor here is like, or rather analogy is, you ask someone 100 plus years ago what they wanted faster horses. Well, in reality, they wanted to move faster. And so actually, should have invented cars versus trying to make horses go faster. So there's a big like underlying important consideration here, which is not just spoken need, but unspoken need, which I know our product team spent a lot of time thinking about. And then you're still going to make, bets. You're going to make a judgment call on like basically how to go tackle an unspoken need. And then in the usage of the product feature, you want to make sure you're measuring, is it actually accomplishing its goal? And if something's not accomplishing the goal, not fixing the problem for the customer, not standing out, not really providing value, well, then it's a good thing to probably remove from the product, right? Not everything you add to your product needs to stay. If it's not actually providing value, editing or cutting can be just as valuable as adding or building in the first place.
Mm-hmm. All right, last question from us, Josh, and this one is from Michael Morotra, and he says, with all that Gusto has done so far and given the ambitions for the next term, how do you and your team measure success?
I mean, I measure, again, I'll use the word progress, but I know what you mean with success. I feel like we're still very early and have lots to go do. And um, I frankly think there's more of a pitfall of we've made it mindset and the danger of that than, hey, we have so much more to go help our customers with. So that's why you'll always hear me react that way to when I hear the word success. Um, but it's measured for me, like the two things that give me joy individually, and then I can talk more at the company level, is just purely in the value we provide customers. So like what they tell us, right? Like, are we doing more for them? Are they grateful? Are they staying on our product? We have a metric we call NPS, Net Promoter Score. That's basically kind of a way to determine, would this customer recommend or advise us to someone else? Like would they tell another small business to use Gusto? And that's a great signal. So a big part of our whole business model depends on having really high NPS. But also on the Gusty side, I want Gusties to, I don't expect anyone to be in the company forever, but for the chapter they're here, for them to be able to describe a chapter where they felt like they could be their authentic self, where they felt like they could grow, learn, have impact, where they felt like they could help move the needle in the company, but also grow towards their professional goals. Um, those are probably the two areas I would spotlight. And I actually do think if you solve lots of pain points and problems for the customer and do it in a way you're proud of and have a sound business model, you create tremendous economic value. That's a byproduct. I think that's something also I'll acknowledge and celebrate. We give equity to Gusties, so everyone benefits from that. But that's a byproduct. I don't dream about Gusto being a $100 billion company. I dream about Gusto helping millions of small businesses and having high NPS while we do it, and helping individuals with the pain points in their life. And I know that the other parts follow. And I think that's also something that people can get sometimes distracted in. Like, our goal is not to hire for the sake of it or have a high market cap for the sake of it. It's to go fix pain points. And again, with a good business model, the other pieces follow from that.
I mean, what a treat to spend the last hour with you, Josh, honestly. And you're so modest, but I hope you hear me, that getting to hear your clarity of vision, your servant leadership, your kindness. It was just such a pleasure to spend the last hour with you. So much fun to be here together with our BreakLine community and our BreakLiners who are at Gusto. Special shout out to all of you. So thank you so much, Josh, for joining us.
Well, thank you to all of you also. And I think just such a big fan of the program, the organization. Thank you, Bethany, Casey, and what you've been able to create. We're thrilled to be partners. More so, I think all of you joining businesses, whether again it's tech or other chapters in your career. I hope that you feel like you can be your authentic self. I hope you, feel like you can grow, develop, and if I can be helpful to you in any way, let me know. But thank you for taking the time to invite me here.
Many thanks, Josh, and happy 4th of July, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend.